we're dads,
Yep.
and we're buddies. We have little kids the same age.
Yep.
And so as dads, we're subjected to the like eternal rewatching of certain sets of movies over and over again.
We were kind of talking and nerding out about all the movies our kids are watching, and are they annoying? Are they not? What do we think about them? How do we feel about them? What are the values we want for our families? And I think as two dads who are watching these things over and over again, we and two guys who I think are interested in stories and can nerd out about some of the stuff. We just found ourselves kind of deep diving on some of the topics that would come up in these and made some interesting discussions. So we thought we'd start this platform to invite some other people into that discussion too, because I think there's a lot of depth and interesting discussions that can come out of kids movies, some of them good, some of them bad. And we thought with kind of Micah's background as a storyboard artist and knowing about art, symbolism, and telling stories in that capacity, and my ability to psychologically analyze and nerd out on stuff, this could be kind of a fun pairing to analyze some of these stories we're watching with our kids all the time. So we hope it's interesting.
We've all deconstructed literature and deconstructed faith and deconstructed, Western civilization. And it's like, well, let's maybe put some of it back together and see why it's actually pretty awesome.
As a, dad watching these movies, like I hear from my friends all the time, like, oh, watching this kids movie again, but that one part comes up in The Lion King, like I'm tearing up every damn time, or like something just strikes me, or whatever it is. And psychologically, I know there's something meaningful happening there. I know it's connecting to something in you. And, there's also certain movies your kids watch all the time that you're just like, I wish they would stop watching this movie because I just hate it so much, right? Why is it so repulsive to you, right? Versus some of the other ones, it's like, oh, actually, I don't mind that one that much, or there could be a worse movie to have on repeat here. So, yeah, I mean, each of these episodes we'll kind of unpack and deep dive on one of the movies, and we'll have a couple different themes we'll unpack, and some different patterns we notice in some of these. We'll give you some insights on what our kids say on them, and so we'd love to hear everyone else's take on some of these as well. You're just getting our kind of thoughts and opinions and deep dives on them.
The movie that we're going to discuss today is Moana, the 2016 film. And it seems fitting because they've announced they're going to do a live action version, which maybe that's an entire topic, is why are they doing live action versions? I have my cynical answer. Yeah. And they also announced a sequel, Moana 2. And I would also ask why. But hey, maybe it's going to be great. So this is like, it's not going to be like a 12-parter, like when Jordan Peterson deconstructs, 90 minutes of Pinocchio over the course.
2.5 hour Carl Jung / Lion King lecture, which I love, but we're not going to talk about it.
Love it, but we're neither qualified nor committed to go that deep on it. But yeah, so we're going to talk about Moana. The things that this is not, it's not a review necessarily. Yeah. We might generate some kind of rating system, but it's inherently not a review.
But we're not.
Yeah, it's more like conversations on a theme.
Yeah. Well, like what's the if you're showing this movie to your kids, or it's a movie that's on repeat in your house, like what are the themes? What are the values that are present? To be mindful of just it's not like a parental content kind of podcast, but like there's topics that come up to be aware of, and I think you and I might have some insight onto how those come up, and the good and the bad of all of it. So that'll be a lot of work to get into. Moana's a fun one too. Like there's a lot of cool connections we've made that I think will be fun to share.
Yeah. Well, so let's dig in. So one of the things that Disney movies all do is they all start with a storybook.
Yeah.
And so back in the day, they had like a live action stop motion element that they filmed of a literal book, and it would like zoom in on it, and then it would open and the pages would flip. And so that was like, and I'm sure someone will actually know this for sure, but I think from just watching it, you can tell there was like a mandate that like Disney films do this. And so the way we get it in this one is it opens with, this like, I'm sure there's like an official Polynesian word for it, but it's like that mural on the wall.
Yeah. Grandma's telling the story of how the ocean and the earth was created, the creation story.
Yeah. And so every Disney movie does that, which we'll like pay attention to as we go. But they all start with like, here's the storybook, and it gives you the context. Some of it do it really well. Like I think this one does it really well.
Yeah.
Some of it do it terribly. Like Raya the Last Dragon was like, I was like, make that the movie. The intro of it was like so detailed and so much exposition. I was like, well, that's your movie. What is this crap?
Yeah, no, Raya is another episode, but I thought that was more of a Zelda video game than a Disney movie.
100%. Yeah. So definitely a different episode. So it lays out the story, and then we go into it.
Quick overview of the story and kind of what happens. I mean, my take is essentially, Moana is interesting because it's the first movie that comes to my mind. If you're looking for a female protagonist going through a hero's journey story, Moana is the first one that pops into my head.
That's great
because she's young, she finds the rock, she's called out to this adventure, she has to wait till she gets older to actually go on it. She goes through, when she gets set out on the adventure, she fails, she goes through a series of trials, she has to find Maui, she has to crash her boat a bunch of times, she gets injured, and then she encounters some deeper trials, which we'll get into. She fights the coconut pirates. She goes and gets the hook back from the crab. There's a descending into the underworld thing that goes on around that. And then ultimately there's a death and resurrection scene. And then they fight the antagonist or the element, the final antagonist or villain, however you want to look at it. It's a little different in this movie because it's more of a man against nature kind of theme. And then she's successful and then returns home to her family, a changed person than when she first set out. So
yeah,
it's very much a hero's journey story.
Yeah, it really is. And it, I did a little bit of digging into its origins. Just like a flyby of some Polynesian myth and some legend, just to get some more context for the story. And as we all know, there was a time in entertainment history where you could tell a story that was loosely themed around a different culture and part of the world.
Yeah.
And you could kind of just play in it. And it was a low impact sport.
Right.
And that's no longer the case. It's
you
now
would see
a very
that with
high
like
impact.
Aladdin, it's Arabian Nights, and they're kind of doing goofy cartoonish stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
This exotic land, right?
Yeah. And to bring it to the foundations of the West, like they did it with Greek
totally.
thought in Hercules, and they just played jazz with it. And if you're actually a Greek mythology major, you're like furious because they
That's
totally
not how that happened. It's like, there
is not a single piece of Greek mythology that is remotely G-rated. You could not make a cartoon about any of it. Even what they did in Fantasia is like a total bastardization of Dionysius and everything. So anyway, that's not the case anymore. So they went into it a little more carefully. But the other thing is that like a myth and a fable does not necessarily make a good story. And so there's this like collision where you have, look at Prince of Egypt, for example. That's another one where like you want to talk about treading on some toes. How about all three monotheistic religions that make up like the majority of the human race and the majority of like armed conflicts before the 20th century.
Right.
20th century had its own
Right.
reason for armed conflicts that were not religious, but well, let's get all three of these religions in a room and come up with a movie.
And let's do
and
a kids
they
movie,
also,
and we'll do Whitney Houston music to it, and it'll be good. Everyone will love it.
yeah,
Right.
what could go wrong? And so they also totally bastardized a lot of elements, but they got like the core stuff right. So looking at Moana, they did kind of the same thing. So Maui is actually a conglomeration of numerous heroic myths from across, Polynesia, and I don't know if they mess with Micronesia, but like, so all of these sort of peoples that have these various like similarities, they like conglomerated into Maui. And from what I understand, interestingly, the movie was originally going to be Maui.
Right.
Like, it was going to be about his adventures and his myth as the hero.
Yeah.
And I actually think what they did is really cool to make him, to take a mortal and have this mortal playing in the arena of the gods, because Maui and Tafiti and what's her name?
Tika,
that's right. And then like Tamatoa being like another one of these demigods. It's cool to take this character and throw in there. And I don't know about you, but I actually wondered if it was because it is so completely the hero's journey.
Yeah.
With one really interesting twist. I wondered if it wasn't originally written to be a male protagonist. And then they were like, well, make it a girl because it's 2016.
No, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my gripe about all the modern let's do a strong female protagonist is they never actually let her go through a damn hero's journey because they can never give her any weaknesses. That was all of Rey in the new Star Wars movies, just like she's great at everything all the time, and it makes her character phenomenally boring. Versus what's really interesting about Moana is she's Luke Skywalker. She's over eager to get out there.
Right.
She doesn't know how to sail. She crashes. She injures herself. She has to go through all that process, and Maui has to make fun of her for like the first half of the movie. And she kind of figures some stuff out as she goes, but you see her go through a hero's journey to really become a hero by the end. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there's like it was originally written with like that in mind, because I don't like this movie is the one, like I don't get any sense there's any fear around like, oh, we can't make her like weak or need a man or anything like that, because that's not her character, but it's what makes her character cool and really interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. I think there's actually something really unique when we do talk about the villain. I think there's something unique about the interaction with the villain that makes it so that it necessarily should thematically be a female protagonist.
Yep.
And I agree with you that like she's not a Mary Sue, and which I also agree with you makes her an interesting character. I think the same reason the first Wonder Woman movie works phenomenally well. The second Wonder Woman movie is just a train wreck, is because of that Mary Sue quality. Like she comes into it out of her element and overambitious and naive and completely uninitiated into this world that she's stepping into. Another cool thing before we get off of it, culturally and historically around this movie that I didn't know, is that there is this thing that happened in the populating of the Polynesian islands, which was this long pause. And so historically, as anthropologists go back and look, there's this huge like millennia long gap in spreading between the islands, and then it just like ends, and then boom, they're populating islands like crazy. And they don't know what it is. And so the history nerd in me, so for all the people that are like, oh, there's so much cultural appropriation, it's like, hey, guess what? I never even would have looked to see if there was anything about this movie, if the movie hadn't come around as correctly or incorrectly as they portrayed things. And so it's super cool. Like, in a way, this movie is stepping in and going, wouldn't it be cool if, what was going on is there was this crazy magical blight.
The reason why all of that travel stopped was because there was this blight that happened, and
Yeah.
Tafiti was lost, and everything, and something needs to be set right.
Yeah. Which comes back to so thematically, the thing that needs to be set right is there's something inherent to nature.
Yeah.
There's something to the fabric of our relationship with the geography that has become warped and fallen, right? And so there's even like even a Judeo-Christian quality to it of like the world has been corrupted. Like we live in paradise, it opens in paradise with golden sands and crystal waters and abundant food and loving family, intergenerational, relationships and stewardship. And then like there's something rotten, there's a snake in the garden.
Yeah.
So there's a snake in the garden. And at first the snake seems to be just a story.
Yeah.
And which is also like when you're a little kid, what you know about the world is mostly through stories and tradition and like culture and things that are around you. And like you don't necessarily really encounter the snake in the garden. You just are told there is one. And then obviously it's not like there aren't kids that go through, confronting evil. But there's like a maturation, and as you step into like early teen years, you can actually start perceiving like your and this is where you can come in as a psychologist. It's like your level of psychological cognition increases, and you can start to perceive arguments and philosophy and theology and morality. Like you actually like, what is it, like the post conventional reasoning state or something? I'm butchering it.
Well, like it goes beyond just like stories or these ideas, but like as someone matures, they can actually start making connections to like, oh, here's what's actually happening. Understanding like symbolism behind the story and how that's playing out in my life. And even if like you don't consciously understand like the symbolism of these stories you grew up with. So what would that be with Moana? Like, even if she doesn't understand, and this doesn't totally work, but the stories that you grew up with, even if you don't consciously understand that, you'll still act them out. You'll still understand like I need to grow, I need to mature, I need to take on responsibility around different areas of life too. And that's a big part of it, is like she is responsible for a lot in her village. She's well sought after. She has to be the one to like help figure out how to organize the village and fix the post and manage the farm and all that.
Yeah. Like she's on she's got to keep the moisture evaporators running. Like it's that like you're being cultivated for a role,
right?
And you're going to be great at it.
Right. But I think there's also like, because oftentimes in these stories, the protagonist is like, they're not some schlub. Like they're not someone who's like, oh gosh, Moana, like we're trying to cultivate her for this role, but she's like not up to it. It's like, no, she's kind of kicking butt in this role, but she's driving for something bigger, right?
She's
good yet still ambitious.
Yeah. Now I wonder, and this has not occurred to me before, but this I wonder if part of, because I think there's a higher tendency in these hero journey structures for a male protagonist to kind of be a schlub, or kind of be like Luke Skywalker, like just screws up as like he's not a great moisture farmer. He's bored. He like loses the droid.
He's more concerned about going off and hanging out with his buddies than actually like.
And I'm curious if there's more examples in this, but part of that, what I wonder about like Moana being like, hey, you're gonna be a great chief. Like if you stay here, it's gonna be great.
Right.
And that there is like this blight is the thing that would stop her from being a great chief. It's not that she has a flaw that would keep her from being a great chief.
Right.
And I wonder if that's connected in a way to the fact that, like, for example, in early schooling, like, girls outscore boys on like all tests.
Yep.
And that in structured social scenarios, given equal equal footing, like all things being equal, girls score higher in math and science, they score higher in English, like the average, right? Not every girl, but like the average score for girls, they just perform better until later in life, like their interests change. And so I wonder if there's some of that. Totally talking about my ass on that one, but I'd be interested.
Well, it's developmentally, girls, their brains mature quicker than boys, and all sorts of evolutionary reasons behind that.
Like a girl training to be chief is going to show promise at it, or way earlier than a boy training to be chief.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's interesting as I'm thinking about themes of this movie and some of the things. I don't know if we want to get into that yet, but like,
yeah, let's go.
Some of the symbolism behind like what she's doing, behind the how the story plays out. Do we want to dive into that piece?
Yeah, let's go. Like the fact that she's called by the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting kind of baptism thing that's happening there. She's being initiated into this journey. I think it's also interesting it doesn't happen till later on as well. The one that I always think is interesting looking at is the so much of the structure of her village is set around the coconut, right? And the fact it's the coconut pirates that later come in. There's a really interesting point I think there we can unpack. Maui, the spirit of adventure, his ego. There's a part where he's built a statue of himself and she has to climb out of the cave and topples the statue. There's Tomatoa, they have to go deep underwater. Everything is hazy and like neon colors around all of it.
Like not only hazy, but psychedelic.
Definitely. Yeah. So I don't know if we got time. There's a lot there we can unpack. Do you want to?
Dig in. What do you want to unpack?
Well, okay. The one I keep nerding out on is this coconut thing, right? So I look at the two big trials Moana has to face after finding Maui is first thing they encounter is the coconut pirates, right? And as she first sets out on her journey, it's I remember we were talking about this and this clicked for me. Like there's the tyrannical nature of the culture she grew up in. She has to confront it. It tries to steal the thing that she's looking for. It's because it's this is gonna sound silly, but like there's these evil coconuts coming after her, and this thing that like symbolizes her whole village, and her whole thing is set up around this. Like, she's the first thing she has to do is confront that and defeat that. The town she's looking to save, or the place she's looking to save, she also has to reckon with the idea that like there is a bad evil side to that as well. It's a little abstract.
Yeah.
What's your take on that as the story?
No, I love that, dude. This has to be our third or fourth focused conversation on Moana, and this is the first time I think I've heard you bring that up. And I love that, and I think you're onto something, because and this is the time to mention the music, like the amazing music in this one, that was like Disney, whenever they change sort of like whoever the steward of their music is, usually someone gets like a few movies, and then they'll kind of swap it up, and so when they swapped over here to Mr. Hamilton,
this is the first Lin-Manuel Miranda one that Disney did.
I think so. I think this is the first one where he stepped in, and it's like phenomenal, and has it informs so much of the identity of the movie. But in that first song around the village, like, yeah, the coconut is only beneficial and the
Yeah.
village is only wonderful. And so I
Yep.
love that, because that is the side of it that's like, there is, and even that she thinks that they're cute to begin with,
Yeah.
when she's like, oh, they're so cute, and then they're like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they turn all terrifying. It's like, oh yeah, there is like a nature behind this that is
Yeah.
frightening and stuff.
It's too much structure. It's the coconut's all great, the village is all great, right? But then when society becomes aggressive and turns into pirates and we want to go and pillage and colonize and all that stuff, like that's
Mm-hmm.
there's the coconut pirates, right? And so
Right.
have to reckon with your potential within that society to turn into that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
Right. And
my
they
uninformed.
grab and they pull in, right? Like
Yeah,
their thing is like
yeah,
grapples, like it
yeah,
draws you back to
yeah,
the coconut. And then the way that she ultimately defeats it is the paddle, which
yep,
is like that symbol of the freedom and the agency
yeah.
to set out into the
It's
sea. Like,
it's the tool to aid you on your adventure. It's the
yeah.
there was all sorts of stuff in the 70s
Well,
and
it's her
80s.
sword, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about like that's your vehicle. That's the car you can go hit the open
Yeah.
road with, and now you're
Yeah.
in
Well,
this
it is the
one.
keys, because without that paddle, you can't steer that thing. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a
Right.
tiller.
Right.
And so it's both her steed and her sword.
Right. Right.
And then it's also engraved, much
Yep.
like Aragorn's
Mm.
blade is engraved. Like, it's engraved by Maui. Like, jokingly, he signs it, but in a way, it's like,
Oh, and then it's got
um,
the heart, and it's got the Maui hook symbol on it, and the heart is
right.
Moana. It's like all of that.
Yeah.
It's there's these like things, they seem goofy, but like it's a
Right.
pattern that plays out across like
Yeah.
generations of stories and myths. So like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the stuff for me that's like cool to notice about. Like there's some depth that's happening in
Yeah.
those moments that just seem like silly things playing out.
What's funny is that, like, Maui calls it out that she's a princess because she has like a cute animal companion,
Yeah,
and so like that is, it's self-referential, but every single princess has an animal companion, and she is a princess.
yeah,
And her animal companions are this pig and this chicken, which
yeah.
are symbols of uh, colonization,
Right,
and
right.
not big C like evil
Yeah, yeah,
colonization, but the thing humans have been doing for the entirety of human
yeah, yeah.
existence, which is
Yeah.
finding new places and trying to live there. Like, pigs and chickens are like,
Livestock. They're
Polynesians did it,
setting for yeah.
yeah, and Europeans did it. So it turns out
Right.
globally, pigs and chickens are really useful,
I didn't
like,
think about that. Yeah.
as things to take with you. And so
Yeah.
this idiot chicken, which its naivete
Mm.
winds up being the thing that like holds on to that stone
Still at the end, yeah.
in that encounter.
Yeah.
Just like her naivete
Right.
is sort of like the beneficial side of that is like, if nothing else, I can just hang on to this thing, hang on to
Right.
this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so what's cool is so coconut pirates, right? First thing as her and Maui set on from that adventure is she's gotta confront the tyrannical nature of the culture she grows up in that wants to pull her in, right? And then the next thing that comes after that is Tomatoa, they gotta go get the hook, they go to the so
Yeah.
my take there is you descend to the underworld. It's this psychedelic, dreamlike space, and then you confront this guy who sings this goofy song, and he points out all your deepest insecurities. So your grandma lied. You're not the chosen one. You're not actually very capable at this. Maui, you're nothing without your hook. You're washed up. You're not what you used to be. All your deepest, darkest
Yeah.
insecurities
Yeah.
have to like it's gonna pull those out, and you have to confront and face these if you're gonna get what you need in order to finish the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And uh I love that um it's psychedelic.
Mhm.
It's monsters on monsters on monsters, and so
Yeah.
it's like the very heart of chaos.
Mhm.
uh he's also clearly a dragon because he's got a treasure hoard,
Yep.
so he's
Yep.
surrounded himself with gold and all that stuff. And and so you step in, and so the hook is also
The
clearly a
sword.
sword, but it's not Moana's, it's
Maui's.
uh, yeah, and in some ways it reminds me of like Dumbo's feather, where it's like a dependence
Mhm.
that's a false dependence. And in this case, it does actually have the magic. Like he really can't do his magic without it. But
Right.
it's also, I think it's also an interesting relation to Maui. Is, you know, he's like ultra masculine, big, broad barrel chest. Like the shape design even is like he's this big block.
Yeah.
And even like his facial features don't look like The Rock. You know, they didn't go for likeness.
Right.
They made him like blocky and like
Right.
bony and like
Yep.
broad, square teeth and like um, and and the dependence on tools
Mm.
as something that masters nature.
Yeah.
And so he and his power, even in his demigodhood, is connected to a tool with which he hooks, he pulls up the islands, and
Yeah.
he like it's somehow connected to like that mastery of nature.
Yeah.
And then she becomes the trickster, right? She has to dress up and deceive,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
she does it through this putting on like this outfit.
Well, and
And
she
then even
flatters him
his
too. Wow, you're so great. She flatters Tomato
right,
and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, which again it occurs to me as because also part of what's happening is she's confronting masculinity, and again, there's parallels with Wonder Woman,
Yeah.
which is not the movie we're talking about, but it's like there's like the feminine naivete, where society and her island and everything have kind of set up the blocks
Yeah.
through which she's going to navigate, and then like confronting, like you said, he's egotistical. He's doesn't listen.
Mm.
He takes her stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a part where he like pees. So like we make a joke about male urination,
Yeah.
which is a total eye opener if you grow up. I have a daughter, and like going like, you do what to pee? Like, it's like there's all these things about it where it's like this confrontation of like, ugh, like this is
Yeah.
how like men go about things, and
Yeah.
like, and the rivalry between Timatoa and Maui is
Yeah.
so petty and
Yeah.
egotistical and
Yeah.
fighting over stuff,
Yeah.
and then of course she comes in and cuts right through it,
Yep.
and cuts to the
Yep.
heart of Tafiti. And I love that he's also patterned after David Bowie,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
David Bowie is this so excessively like egotistical that he
Yeah.
like almost comes all the way back around the spectrum to feminine again. Like he gets
Right.
so
Got the
masculine.
flamboyant, but like over
Yeah,
the top glitz glamour thing going on.
yeah, yeah. Where it's like I'm so into my ego and masculinity that I'm gonna like put on high heels and eyeliner, because like
Yeah.
that's how masculine I am. Is like you still
Right.
can't feminize me with that stuff. And so yeah, so they defeat him. They leave. Uh, they invert him. They humiliate him. Right, because the crab being on his back is
Yeah.
complete emasculation and
Yeah.
humiliation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Think about the yes, bellies up at the end as they're like, see ya, and they catch a ride back up to the surface.
yeah, yeah,
So from there, then they go on, and Maui kind of has this like training montage where he's learning how to use his hook again and figuring that out. But then like right after that, get to they get to Taka, but they fail. They go to get
right.
in. Maui goes to confront. Maui goes to do it. He gets knocked back. His hook almost breaks, and he's totally discouraged. He's like, Tomato was right. I can't do it. Right. And
Yeah.
then,
Well, and the way in which they try to do it is to just go straight at her.
yeah, right.
They're like, we're gonna overcome her with direct action, with power.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah,
Which is Maui's ego, his way of going about this. I got my hook. I just got my training montage.
yeah,
I got my confidence back.
yeah,
Reckless. Let's charge right at him. Right. So they
yeah,
fail, And then I mean I think that's where if you're looking through the lens of the hero's journey, you know, they say that the hero has to die and be resurrected. That's where I think
Yeah.
to look at it as Moana dies and resurrected. She
Yeah.
fails. Maui leaves her. Um, the heart sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and then her, and then you even see it the way they do the art of all of it. Like everything gets dark. Like you can't see
Yeah.
the sky, you can't see the clouds. There's no stars, and then everything is just black. So she's in hell, and then um grandma shows up, spirit of her
Yeah.
grandma shows up. So spirit of your ancestors comes, reminds
Right.
you of who you are, what your purpose is,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then
and
she has
that's
to
also how
dive
we know
down.
that
Yeah,
she's in the land of the dead
yeah,
because her because the dead show up.
yeah, yeah. Well, and
And
yeah, it's not just her grandma; it's the ancestors and all the other
right.
boats, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she has to dive down even deeper to the depths of the ocean, get
Right.
the heart, and then go back. She comes up with the plan, um, and then and then they go on to finish the story.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is they're going back to finish the story. It's not a okay, now Moana's got everything she needs. She goes and she kicks ass on her own because now she's so equipped. She still needs Maui to come back and help her. The ocean keeps coming
Hmm.
out, blocking the rocks that Taka's throwing at her, and it's everything else in the story culminates to put her in position to do what she ultimately does at the end, which we can unpack here in a second. Um, to I don't even know what word you'd call it, to pacify Taka, to bring how would you describe, because it's not exactly defeating the antagonist. How would you describe the end here?
So it's funny. It's basically she has to come back and do the trench run.
Yeah, yeah.
So right. So and she does actually go through this break in the thing and like run
Star
through the
Wars trench
trench.
run. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Han Solo goes, yeah, like comes
Yep. Yeah.
and you know
Yeah. It's
so
same thing in Top Gun Maverick, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like and that's so Maui is her initiation into the realm of the gods because she can't even really begin her quest like until she finds Maui. That's
Yeah.
part
Right.
one. Now you're in the realm where you can contend with gods
Yeah.
because you're going to have to go contend with this god.
Yep.
And so that's you cross the threshold in Campbellian structure,
Yep.
heroic mythic structure. So you cross the threshold, which is the reef, and you get out there and you start immediately. What you do is you meet your allies and enemies, and
Yep.
so she and the guardian of the threshold, and
Mm.
so she gets out past the reef, realizes that she's got the chicken with her,
Yep.
right? So that's they could have introduced it earlier. They didn't. They waited until the correct time to introduce it, which is when you meet your allies and enemies. And then you encounter the guardian, the threshold guardian. And so when you defeat the threshold guardian, they either, become an enemy later or they
Yeah.
join you. And
They're on it.
so he joins her. And they go on the Millennium Falcon and they go out. And so he returns because she beat him, like she won him over ultimately, even though he leaves for a moment. And it's the act of her dedication
Yeah.
and the heart, like you said, the heart and the hook
Mhm.
are necessarily together.
Yeah.
Uh,
Is
and
there this might be in a tangent off of what you said there, but like I would always notice this theme around like Maui's ego. He also kind of represents this spirit of adventure, which is egotistical and wants to kind of drive things forward, right? It's this very kind of masculine spirit of adventure thing. But she's kind of constantly like wrestle, like he leaves, he comes back, he's on her side, he's
mm-hmm,
not, she's following along with
mm-hmm,
him. He's kind of following, like she's trying to tame. Symbolically, you could see it as like she's trying to tame the spirit of adventure within herself.
uh-huh, yeah,
And then at the end, it bails on her, but then it comes back to rescue her at the same time.
yeah. Well, so he's a trickster. He's a
Yeah.
shapeshifter.
Yeah.
And, like that's the very nature of his powers.
That's
Is
what
he's a
grandma
shapeshifter.
says. Right.
Yeah, and so he's Mercury. He's immutable. He's mutable. He changes his mind and his motivations frequently. He's fickle. He's a thief. Um, but we also know that he is the one that has to be part of the process.
Yeah.
So uh,
Mm.
so he's completely necessary. And
He has
then
to have him on
Moana,
board. He
She
can't
has
just
to have him on
he
board.
can't
And
just be
so,
some like, oh, he's kind of a sidekick. He's there. Like he is a integral
yeah,
part.
yeah, and he is mentor, but not in the way of like the mentor that dies in terms of like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that. Because the grandma is more Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she even comes back as a blue ghosty, which is
Right.
like, come on,
Yeah.
guys. But I guess you bought Star Wars, so you can steal it. And Moana is a wayfinder.
Yeah.
So she finds a way. And so she tries being a trickster when she dresses up. She
Yeah.
tries, even uses one of Maui's moves that she, so she has learned from him when she does that thing where she like stomps on the front of the canoe and like does the 180. And
Yeah.
so she does learn from him, but ultimately she needs to come into her own power, which is being a wayfinder, and she finds a way. And so when she's able to integrate what she knows from her island, what she like brings from her ancestors, and what she's learned from Maui,
Yeah.
she can find a way.
Yeah.
And then he shapeshifts, does what he needs to do in order to get her to that place. And then, harkening all the way back to this idea of her being a water hero, is once she gets to the innermost, like the fortress, she gets to the core of the Death Star or whatever, she parts the water like Moses. And we know from we know that Moses is a water hero. Like he strikes the rock and produces water, and he was born out of the water in the basket. Like so she similarly is this water hero that can change to suit her circumstances, and she finds a way, and water makes a way, right? Like water on Earth carves out canyons and makes ways. So she gets there. And this is all coming back to why I think the female hero in this situation is suitable to this particular villain.
Yeah, I don't think it works if she's a male character. Like,
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
especially because like because what she does is then she restores the heart. It's this very caring, nurturing, almost embracing like motherly type thing. She's restoring Mother Earth with a compassion, care. What's the line she says? Like, it's who you truly are. I see who you truly are. Right?
Yeah. So she has been on this journey to see who she truly is.
Yeah.
And then when she arrives, also it's because it's this Gaia force, and the very feeling of nature is feminine, like that, which is part of why all Disney princesses have an animal companion, is because like that femininity does have a connection to nature. And so they're drawn to each other in that way. And so it is in that moment where she is able to heal nature through her connection with nature. She looks at it and in a way recognizes someone who has lost a sense of identity and who they are. So the nature has been separated from like integrated life in terms of Te Fiti into cold, hard rock, which is an excess of order, and boiling, molten lava, which is an excess of chaos. And so by stealing that heart, which is this like Fibonacci sequence kind of golden spiral thing, which is like the very essence of nature mathematically, the nature has been disintegrated into cold, dead order and violent chaos. And so when she steps there, she parts the Red Sea, draws the chaos, and then reunites it with order through this mathematic perfection,
it's deep, man.
with a courage that is uniquely feminine, and then restores this integration where the cold, hard, dead lava is actually this really, really fertile soil. So,
which it's a cool moment because like you see like the reaction you get, because like you don't like this is what good stories do. You're not conscious of all those things coming together, but like that's what's happening at once, is why it feels so right and so satisfying when all those things are happening. I think it's why everyone hates like just a Deus Ex Machina where like something just happens and it all works out. It's like, all right, like no,
Yeah.
it
Yeah. You're
just
like, that doesn't resemble life at all.
no, it doesn't. It's just it feels like bad storytelling. It feels lazy. It feels unsatisfying. Like another island movie story, the Lost series. Like everyone was so dissatisfied at the end because it's just like it was none of this fit. It was just kind of ideas getting thrown out there. But like, why a like whether people intellectually know it or not, you
Yeah.
know it because you feel satisfied with it. It's these
Yeah.
things line up, and they line up in so many different dimensions in all those things you just said, right? Um, I mean, I've known a bunch of people who like I tear up every time at that part. Cool, it's striking
Right.
something in you when
Yeah.
that happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What is it about that moment that draws that emotion that you're responding to?
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah, there's this theme we'll unpack in other movies too, around like the antagonist death, if you want to put it that way. In this case,
Yeah.
like I don't really think of like Taka as like an antagonist, but kind of, right? But like how the story gets resolved at the end, there's always really interesting symbolism that happens in those. Um, kind of tease. I see a bunch in like Lion King, Beauty and the Beast has some really interesting stuff. Little Mermaid, but this one, it's because it's always like the culmination of everything in the story kind of being symbolized there. Um, so yeah, she restores the heart of Tafiti, and then they things seem to snap in. They go back to normal, and then they set back on the journey home.
Yeah. Yeah. And the antagonist death, like there's this trend that's happening in kids movies in the last, I would say, like last 5 to 8 years,
Yeah.
where antagonists get talked out of being bad guys.
Right,
Like
right. They're all misunderstood in whatever
they're all
way.
misunderstood, and all they really needed was for someone to just talk to them and like for them to be seen, or
Yeah,
like to be educated. And
yeah.
which is sort of this materialist humanist worldview, is that like, oh, education is actually going to solve everything.
Right. Well,
So
it's because
um
Moana's kind of got a little bit about that because she sees Taka. I think that's a if that's all you see in that, it's not quite enough because if it's just like, oh, she just like, oh, like Maui stole your heart and how much of a jerk for him. If that's all it was, it wouldn't feel so satisfying, right? But it's
yeah.
like, see
Yeah.
you, and now I'm restoring that order back into the
Yeah.
chaos. Like I see and understand what happened, and now we're still going back into the order that Maui represents as the masculine is still needed to restore that chaotic feminine.
Yeah. Yeah. And even relating to like Maui, we discover like we know that it's Maui's fault
Yeah,
because he stole the heart and
right.
like created Taka.
Yeah,
But we don't know that Taka is Tafiti
right. Yeah,
until this moment.
yeah,
But Maui knows.
yeah, right.
Like Maui, on some level, I think, must know that that is the root of how Taka came around in the first place.
Yeah, yeah,
And so he's in this place, which is also interesting, where he, in order to try to get affection and belonging and acceptance, he in like transgressed against nature and against the feminine,
yeah, yeah,
which I think also rings true, is that most men, all they really want is affection and intimacy, and they try to get it the wrong way.
right, 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 right.
And so there's something about that. And what's great is, and I can't help but think, if it wasn't the climate that it was when they made Moana, if they made it today, uh, that would become the whole thing. Is like, isn't Maui a horrible guy? He, for better or worse, like he raped,
Yeah, yeah.
which originally
It
was a
would have that theme
term.
there for sure, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and even that term originally was for taking away something. It wasn't
right.
actually originally a term that meant any
Sexual violence.
like
Yeah,
implicit sexual activity. It was like to steal away. And so he like plundered he broke her heart. He stole her heart. And, but this whole journey that he's been brought along on is one of reconciliation. Right. He's trying to like make recompense for it. He's trying to set things right the best he knows how. He needs help. And then once he has restored his correct posture with nature and with the divine feminine, he is allowed again to go with this tool to go out and interact with nature. And so even his relationship with nature is reset.
Yeah. Because it doesn't take it to like, I mean, even at the end, like they go out, they set sailing for new islands again. Like it's not like these jerks are going out and colonizing everyone, and they're like the bad guys. Right. No, the spirit of adventure. We get to go out and do that, and that leads to this like harmony and union, which is like you need that spirit of adventure to interact with nature and subdue it in a sense, but also like. You find that harmony that actually works.
Oh, and she rescues her father. So she comes home, she redeems her father's desires to go beyond the reef, and rescues his abundance of order. Yeah, he rescues the tyrannical nature of his kingship, and then life finds a way. Yeah, and so.
So a couple of kind of just fun questions stepping out of the symbolic here. Maybe this will get answered in Moana too. Not that I would really care or consider it like canon, but does Moana become the chief at the end that she was prepared for? Does she eventually step into that role, do you think?
She is wearing regalia and her father no longer is.
Okay.
I think if I remember the end credits, like, because she has this like regalia on that resembles the regalia in like the main Captain Wayfinder ancestor.
Right.
And I don't think her dad is wearing the regalia anymore.
That's interesting. So at the end, that would be she does step into the role that was planned for her at the beginning, because she goes back up and she puts the conch on top of the thing and she takes her place. Yeah, that's
So I think. And then what's also interesting is, speaking of like the death of villains, is so in this case, what we found is like who we thought was the villain is really just, nature out of balance. And so, and so it turns out to be like you're setting the world right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the villain, except in the like post credits, we go back to Tematoa, who is one of my all-time favorite villains, and Jermaine Clement's performance and everything is like so awesome. Steals the show. Yeah. But he's still down there, and he's still in a position of humiliation. Yeah. Which who is it that's? I wish I should have had this quote ready. I will in future podcasts have quotes ready, but the idea that the way to defeat the devil is to humiliate him. Like the devil can stand opposition, he can't stand humiliation. And so he's still down there. And then I also wonder in that opening storybook, if you look, you can see drawn on it the coconut people.
It's all the monsters she encounters. There's Taka.
It's all the monsters she's encountered. There's a monster on there that isn't referenced in the movie.
Okay.
And so I wonder if they cut
that Moana 2
out, or if that'll come back in Moana 2. If there's another monster we're missing, but
it'll be interesting to see. Jermaine Clement's performance is awesome. I don't know if you listen to Bill Simmons' Rewatchables, but they always, when they're breaking down movies, they have a thing called the Heat Check Award, which is the actor who's in like one scene and just crushes it, right? They're referencing like the like a player in basketball who comes off the bench and just drains like 4 3-pointers and then comes off, like that's all he does, right? Like he comes in and just like crushes it, and then he's got his roll and he's done.
Yeah. He definitely, 100%. And I'm glad you explained the reference, because I don't speak basketball.
I know. I got to explain.
Okay, so what's in a nutshell?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I recommend Moana. easily.
It's when like, because there was a good like 2 year period, and it may still come up because I have a 1 year old who's probably going to get old enough to get it right. But like both my no, now 6 year old and my 3 year old have gone through Moana phases where it was just on nonstop, right? And I
Yeah,
hear that from friends' households all the time, and it's one that I consistently hear is like, I'm fine with it. Like music's good, characters are
yeah,
fun. Like
yeah,
I'm not annoyed by it. I'm not. The animation's good. It just things work, right?
yeah,
I think
yeah,
Disney said like part of their reason for like remaking all of it and doing all that is, it's one of their most lucrative franchises over the past like 20 years.
yeah, yeah. So kids like it, parents like it. The animation is good. The character design is good.
Mm.
Like the world is beautiful and fleshed out.
Yep.
The music, like you're gonna get hooked on it. I
Yep.
think every single one of those songs is a karaoke banger. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you bring any song from Moana to
Yeah.
karaoke, instant
Right.
hit.
Right. I know. Everyone
Um,
loves seeing their kids do the Maui rap. Like
yeah,
I got a video of my with 3 year old at the time. Dads do it. It's fun.
yeah. And so I think it thematically it has timeless themes.
Yep.
And I think it, and I'm sure this will come up because that's just it's now become genre and cliche. Um, Female protagonist done super super well.
It's the best example I've seen of a well done female protagonist.
Yeah, yeah. Like in the last 10 years, and
Yeah.
please prove me wrong. Like, but
No, if anyone's got a different example, I'd love to see it. But like,
yeah,
I keep coming back to like, they're so scared to give her any weaknesses or any flaws, which is
yeah,
makes the character rich and interesting. Uh,
exactly.
and that's when Moana goes to get past the threshold, get over the reef, and she fails because she doesn't know how to sail. It's like, okay, like we're dealing with a real person here.
Yeah.
Uh, like that is such a necessary part of the story. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think it's why a big part of why people connect to it so much.
Yeah. 100%.
Yep. So yeah, definitely recommend it. I think it's you could there's a lot worse movies you could have playing on repeat in your house. And if you're in that stage where this movie's on repeat, then I think it gives you something a little bit more higher level to engage in than just something on in the background.